Harry Potter, Chapter 15, The Forbidden Forest. Things couldn't have been worse. Filch took them down to Professor McGonagall's study on the first floor, where they sat and waited without saying a word to each other. Hermione was trembling. Excuses, alibis, and wild cover-up stories chased each other around Harry's brain, each more feeble than the last. He couldn't see how they were going to get out of the trouble this time. They were concerned. How could they have been so stupid as to forget the cloak? There was no reason on earth that Professor McGonagall would accept for their being out of bed and creeping around the school in the dead of night, let alone being up the tallest astronomy tower, which was out of bounds except for classes, at Norbert and the invisibility cloak, and they might as well as be packing their bags already. Had Harry thought that things could have been worse, he was wrong. When Professor McGonagall appeared, she was leading Neville. "Harry!" Neville burst out the moment he saw the other two. "I was trying to find you to warn you. I heard Malfoy was saying he was going to catch you. He said you had a drag." Harry shook his head violently to shut Neville up, but Professor McGonagall had seen. She looked more likely to breathe fire than Norbert as she towered over the three of them. "I would never have believed it if any of you. Mr. Filch says you were up in the astronomy tower. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Explain yourselves right now." It was the first time Hermione had ever failed to answer a teacher's question. She was staring at her slippers as still as a statue. "I think I have got a good idea of what's been going on," said Professor McGonagall. "It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock and bull story about a dragon, trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I have already caught him. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom here had heard the story and believed it too." Harry caught Neville's eyes and tried to tell him without words that his wasn't true, because Neville was looking stunned and hurt. Poor, blundering Neville. Harry knew what it must have cost him to try and find them in the dark to warn them. "I'm disgusted," said Professor McGonagall. "4 students out of bed in one night. I had never heard of such thing before. You, Miss Granger, I thought you had more sense. As for you, Mr. Potter, I thought Gryffindor meant more to you than this. All 3 of you will receive detention. Yes, you too, Mr. Longbottom. Nothing gives you the right to walk around the school at night, especially these days. It's very dangerous, and 50 points will be taken from Gryffindor." 50! Harry gasped. They would lose the lead, and the lead he had won in the last Quidditch match. 50 points each, said Professor McGonagall, breathing heavily through her long pointed nose. "Professor, please, you can't. Don't tell me what I can and can't do, Potter. Now get back to bed, all of you. I have never been so ashamed of Gryffindor students. 150 points lost. That put Gryffindor in the last place in one night. They would ruin any chance Gryffindor had for the House Cup." Harry felt as though the bottom had dropped out of his stomach. How could they ever make up for this? Harry didn't sleep all night. He could hear Neville sobbing in his pillow for what seemed like hours. Harry couldn't think of anything to say to comfort him. He knew Neville, like himself, was dreading the dawn. What would happen when the rest of Gryffindor found out what they had done? At first, Gryffindors, passing the giant hourglasses that recorded the house points the next day, thought there had been a mistake. How could they suddenly have 150 points fewer than yesterday? And then the story started to spread. Harry Potter, the famous Harry Potter, their hero of 2 Quidditch matches, had lost them all the points, him and a couple of other stupid first years. From being one of the most popular and admired people at the school, Harry was suddenly the most hated. Even Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turned on him, because everyone had been longing to see Slytherin lose the House Cup. Everywhere Harry went, people pointed and didn't trouble to lower their voices as they insulted him. Slytherins, on the other hand, clapped as he walked past them, whistling and cheering. "Thanks, Potter, we owe you one." Only Ron stood by him. "They'll all forget this in few weeks. Fred and George have lost loads of points in all their time they have been here, and people still like them. They have never lost 150 points in one go, though, have they?" said Harry miserably. "Well, no," Ron admitted. It was a bit late to repair the damage, but Harry swore to himself not to meddle in things that weren't his business from now on. Harry had it with sneaking around and spying. He felt so ashamed of himself that he went to Wood and offered to resign from the Quidditch team. Resign? Wood thundered. What good will do that to you? How are we going to get any points back if we can't win at Quidditch? But even Quidditch had lost its fun. The rest of the team wouldn't speak to Harry during practice, and if they had to speak about him, they called him the Seeker. Hermione and Neville were suffering too. They didn't have as a bad time as Harry because they weren't as well known, but nobody would speak to them either. Hermione had stopped drawing attention to herself in class, keeping her head down and working in silence. Harry was almost glad that the exams weren't far away. All the studying he had to do kept his mind off the misery. He, Ron and Hermione kept to themselves, working late into the night, trying to remember the ingredients in complicated potions, learn charms and spells by heart, memorize the dates of the magical discoveries and the goblin rebellions. Then about a week before the exams were due to start, Harry's new resolution not to interfere in anything that didn't concern him was put to an unexpected test. Walking back from the library on his own one afternoon, he heard somebody whimpering from a classroom up ahead. As he drew closer, he heard Quirrell's voice. No, not again, please. It sounded as though someone was threatening him. Harry moved closer. All right, he heard Quirrell sob. Next second, Quirrell came hurrying out of the classroom, straightening his turban. He was pale and looked as though he was about to cry. He strode out of sight. Harry didn't think Quirrell had even noticed him. He waited until Quirrell's footsteps had disappeared, then peered into the classroom. It was empty, but a door stood ajar at the other end. Harry was halfway toward it before he remembered what he had promised himself, not meddling. All the time, and all the same, he would have gambled 12 Sorcerer's Stone that Snape had just left the room, and from what Harry had just heard, Snape would be walking within a new spring in his step. Quirrell seemed to have been given in at last. Harry went back to the library where Hermione was testing Ron on astronomy. Harry told them what he had heard. Snape's done it then, said Ron. If Quirrell's told him how to break his anti-dark foe spell. They're still fluffy though, said Hermione. Maybe Snape's found out how to get past him without asking Hagrid, said Ron, looking up at the thousands of books surrounding them. I bet there's a book somewhere in here telling you how to get past a giant three-headed dog. So, what do we do, Harry? The light of adventure was kindling again in Ron's eyes, but Hermione answered before Harry could. Go to Dumbledore. That's what we should have done ages ago. If we try anything ourselves, we'll be thrown out for sure. But we have got no proof, said Harry. Quirrell's scared too to back us up. Snape's only got to say he doesn't know how the troll got in at Halloween and that he was nowhere near the third floor. Who do you think they will believe? Him or us? It's not exactly a secret we hate him. Dumbledore will think that we made it up to get him sacked. Filch wouldn't help us if his life depended on it. He is too friendly with Snape, and the more students get thrown out, the better. He'll think. And don't forget, we are not supposed to know about the stone or Fluffy. That will take a lot of explaining. Hermione looked convinced, but Ron didn't. If we just do a bit of poking around. No, said Harry. We have done enough poking around. He pulled a map of Jupiter around him and started to learn the names of its moon. The following morning, notes were delivered to Harry, Hermione and Neville at the breakfast table. They were all the same. Your detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall. Professor McGonagall. Harry had forgotten they still had detention to do. In the furor over the points they had lost, he half expected Hermione to complain that this was a whole night of studying lost, but she didn't say a word. Like Harry, she felt that they deserved what they had got. At 11 o'clock that night, they said goodbye to Ron in the common room and went down to the entrance hall with Neville. Filch was already there, and so was Malfoy. Harry had also forgotten that Malfoy had gotten detention too. Follow me, said Filch, lighting a lamp and leading them outside. I'll bet you'll think that twice about breaking a school rule again, won't you, eh? He said, leering at him. Oh yes, hard work and pain are the best teachers, if you ask me. It's just pity that the old punishment die out, hang you by your wrist from the ceiling for a few days. I have got the chains still in my office. Keep them all well oiled in case if they were needed. Right off they go, and don't think of running off now. It'll be worse for you if you do. They marched off across the dark grounds. Neville kept sniffing. Harry wondered what their punishment was going to be. It must be something really horrible, or Filch wouldn't be sounding so delighted. The moon was bright, but the clouds, scuttling across, it kept throwing them into darkness. Ahead, Harry could see the lighted windows of Hagrid's hut. Then they heard a distant shout. "Is that you, Filch? Hurry up! I want to get started." Harry's heart rose. If they were going to be with working with Hagrid, it wouldn't be so bad. His relief must have showed in his face, because Filch said, "I suppose you think you'll be enjoying yourself with that oaf. Well, think again, boy. It's into the forest you're going, and I'm much mistaken if you'll all come out in one piece." At this, Neville let out a little moan, and Malfoy stopped dead in his tracks. "The forest," he repeated, and he didn't sound quite as cool as usual. "We can't go in there at night. There's all sorts of things in there. Werewolves, I heard." Neville clutched the sleeve of Harry's robe and made a choking voice. "That's your problem, isn't it?" said Filch, his voice cracking with glee. "Shouldn't have thought of them werewolves before you got into trouble, shouldn't you?" Hagrid came striding toward out of the dark, Fang at his heel. He was carrying a large crossbow, and a quiver of bows hung over his shoulder. "About time," he said. "I've been waiting for half an hour already." "All right, Harry and Hermione." "I should be too friendly to them, Hagrid," said Filch coldly. "They are here to be punished after all." "That's why you're late, is it?" said Hagrid, frowning at Filch. "Been lecturing them, eh? It's not your place to do that. You have come down a bit. I'll take over from here." "I'll be back at dawn," said Filch. "For what's left of them," he added nastily, and he turned and started to back toward the castle, his lamp bobbing away in the darkness. Malfoy now turned to Hagrid. "I'm not going into that forest," he said, and Harry was pleased to hear the note of panic in his voice. "You are if you want to stay at Hogwarts," said Hagrid fiercely. "You have done wrong and now you got to pay for it. But this time is severance stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we would be copying lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he would tell you that how is it at Hogwarts?" Hagrid growled. "Copying lines. What good's that to anyone? You'll do something useful and you'll get out. If you think your father would rather you're expelled, then get back here for your castle. Pack, go on." Malfoy didn't move. He looked at Hagrid furiously, but then dropped his gaze. "Right then," said Hagrid. "Now listen carefully, cause it's dangerous. What we are gonna do tonight, and I don't want any one of you taking risks. Follow me over here in a moment." He led them to a very edge of the forest. Holding his lamp up high, he pointed down a narrow, winding earth track and disappeared into the thick black trees. A light breeze lifted their hair as they looked into the forest. "Look there," said Hagrid. "See the stuff shining on the ground? Silvery stuff? That's a unicorn blood. There's a unicorn in here, been hurt badly by something. This is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We are gonna try and find the poor thing. We might have to put it out of its misery." "And what if whatever hurt the unicorn finds us first?" said Malfoy, unable to keep the fear out of his voice. "There's nothing that lives in the forest that will hurt you, if you're with me, or Fang," said Hagrid. "And keep to the path, right? Now we are gonna split into two parties and follow the trail in different directions. There's blood all over the place. It must have been staggering around since the last night at least." "I want Fang," said Malfoy quickly, looking at Fang's long teeth. "All right, but I warn you, he's a dirty coward," said Hagrid. "So me, Harry and Hermione will go on one way, and Draco, Neville and Fang will go the other. Now if any one of us finds the unicorn, we'll send up a green sparks, right? Get your wands out and practice now. That's it. And if anyone gets into trouble, send up red sparks, and we will come and find you. So be careful. Let's go. The forest was dark and silent. A little way into they reached a fork in the earth path, and Harry, Hermione, and Hagrid took the left path while Malfoy, Neville, and Fang took the right. They walked in silence, their eyes on the ground. Every now and then, a ray of moonlight through the branches above lit a spot of silver blue blood on the fallen leaves. Harry saw that Hagrid looked very worried. Could a werewolf be killing the unicorns? Harry asked. Not fast enough, said Hagrid. It's not easy to catch a unicorn. They're powerful magic creatures. I never knew one to be hurt before. They walked past a mossy tree stump. Harry could hear running water. There must be streams somewhere close by. There were still spots of unicorn blood here and there along with the winding path. You're alright, Hermione? Hagrid whispered. Don't worry, it can't have gone far if it's badly hurt, and they will be able to. Get behind that tree! Hagrid seized Harry and Hermione and hurled them off the path behind the towering oak. He pulled out an arrow and fitted it into his crossbow, raising it to fire. The three of them listened. Something was slithering over the dead leaves nearby. It sounded like a cloak trailing along the ground. Hagrid was squinting up the dark path, but after a few seconds, the sound faded away. I knew it, he murmured. There's someone in here that shouldn't be. A werewolf? Harry suggested. That wasn't no werewolf, and it wasn't no unicorn either, said Hagrid grimly. Right, follow me, but be careful now. They walked more slowly, ears straining for the faintest sound. Suddenly in a clearing ahead, something definitely moved. Who's there? Hagrid called. Show yourself, I'm armed. And into the clearing came, was it a man or a house, to the waist, and a man, and with red hair and beard, but below there was a horse gleaming chestnut body with a long, reddish tail. Harry and Hermione's jaws dropped. Oh, it's you, Ronan, said Hagrid in relief. How are you? He walked forward and shook the centaur's hand. Good evening to you, Hagrid, said Ronan. He had a deep, sorrowful voice. Were you going to shoot me? Can't be too careful, Ronan, said Hagrid, panting his crossbow. There's somewhat bad loose in this forest. This is Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, by the way, students up at the school, and this is Ronan, you two. He's a centaur. We'd noticed, said Hermione faintly. Good evening, said Ronan. Students are you? And do you learn much up at school? A bit, said Hermione timidly. A bit? Well, that's something, Ronan sighed. He flung back his head and stared at the sky. Mars is bright tonight. Yeah, said Hagrid, glancing up too. Listen, I'm glad we have run into you, Ronan, 'cause there is a unicorn been hurt. You seen anything? Ronan didn't answer immediately. He stared unblinkingly upward and then sighed again. Always the innocent are the first victims, he said. So it has been for ages past. So it is now. Yeah, said Hagrid. But have you seen anything, Ronan? Anything unusual? Mars is bright tonight, Ronan repeated, while Hagrid watched him impatiently. Unusually bright. Yeah, but I was meaning anything unusual a bit nearer home, said Hagrid. So you haven't noticed anything strange? Yet again, Ronan took a while to answer. At last he said, the forest hides many secrets. The movement in the trees behind Ronan made Hagrid raise his bow again, but it was only a second centaur, black-haired and bodied and wilder looking than Ronan. Hello, Wayne, said Hagrid. Are you alright? Good evening, Hagrid. I hope you are well. Well enough, look. I have just been asking Ronan, you seen anything odd in here lately? There's a unicorn been injured. Would you know anything about it? Bane walked over to stand next to Ronan. He looked skyward. Mars is bright tonight, he said simply. We are heard, said Hagrid grumpily. Well, if either of you do see anything, let me know, won't you? We'll be off then. Harry and Hermione followed him out of the clearing, staring over their shoulders at Ronan and Bane until the trees blocked their view. Never, said Hagrid irritably. Try and get the straight answer out of a centaur. Ruddy stragglers. not interested in anything closer in the moon. Are there many of them in here? Asked Hermione. Oh, a few. Keep themselves to themselves mostly, but they are good enough to turn up if ever I want a word. They are deep-minded centaurs. They know things, just don't let much. Do you think that was the centaur we heard earlier? Said Harry. Did that sound look like hooves to you? Nah, if you ask me, that was what's been killing the unicorns. Never heard anything like it before. They walked on through the dense, dark trees. Harry kept looking nervously over his shoulder. He had a nasty feeling they were being watched. He was very glad that they had Hagrid's help and his crossbow with them. They had just passed a bend in the path when Hermione grabbed Hagrid's arm. Hagrid, look! Red sparks. The others are in trouble. You two wait here, Hagrid shouted. Stay on the path. I'll come back for you. They heard him crashing away through the undergrowth and stood looking at each other, very scared, until they couldn't hear anything but the rustling of leaves around them. You don't think they have been hurt, do you? Whispered Hermione. I don't care if Malfoy has, but if something's got Neville, it's our fault. He's in here in the first place. The minutes dragged by. Their ears seemed sharper than usual. Harry seemed to be picking up every sigh of the wind, every cracking twig. What was going on? Where were the others? At last, a great crunching noise announced Hagrid's return. Malfoy, Neville, and Fang were with him. Hagrid was fuming. Malfoy seemed to have sneaked up behind Neville and grabbed him as a joke. Neville had panicked and set up the red sparks. We'll be lucky to catch anything now, with the racket you two were making. Right, we are changing groups. Neville, you stay with me, and Hermione, Harry, you go with Fang and this idiot. I'm sorry, Hagrid added and whispered to Harry, but you'll have a harder time fighting here, and we gotta get this done. So Harry set off into the heart of the forest with Malfoy and Fang. They walked for nearly half an hour deeper into the forest, until the path became most impossible to follow because the trees were so thick. Harry thought the blood seemed to be getting thicker. There were splashes on the roots of the tree, as though the poor creature had been thrashing around in pain close by. Harry could see a clearing head through the tangled branches of an ancient oak. Look, he murmured, holding out his arm to stop Malfoy. Something bright white was gleaming on the ground. They inched closer. It was the unicorn all right, and it was dead. Harry had never seen anything so beautiful and sad. Its long, slender legs were stuck out in odd angles, where it had fallen, and its mane was spread pearly white on the dark leaves. Harry had taken one step toward it when a slithering sound made him freeze where he stood. A bush on the edge of the clearing quivered, then out of the shadows a hooded figure came crawling across the ground like some stalking beast. Harry, Malfoy, and Fang stood transfixed. The cloaked figure reached the unicorn, lowered its head over the wound in the animal's side, and began to drink its blood. Argh! Malfoy let out a terrible scream and bolted. So did Fang. The hooded figure raised its head and looked right at Harry. Unicorn blood was dribbling down its front. It got to its feet and came swiftly toward Harry. He couldn't move for fear. Then a pain like he had never felt before pierced his head. It was though his car were on fire. Half blinded and staggered backward, he heard hooves behind him galloping, and something jumped clean over Harry, charging at the figure. The pain in Harry's head was so bad he fell to his knees. It took a minute or two to pass. When he looked up, the figure had gone. A centaur was standing over him, not Ronan or Bane. This one looked younger. He had white blonde hair and a palomino body. Are you all right? Said the centaur, putting Harry to his feet. Yes, thank you. What was that? The centaur didn't answer. He had astonishingly blue eyes like pale sapphires. He looked carefully at Harry, his eyes lingering on the scar that stood out livid on Harry's forehead. You are the Potter boy, aren't you? He said. You had better get back to Hagrid. The forest is not safe at this time, especially for you. Can you ride? It will be quicker this way. My name is Vijay, he added, as he lowered himself onto his front legs so that Harry could clamber onto his back. There was suddenly a sound of more galloping from the other side of the clearing. Ronan and Bane came bursting through the trees, their flanks heaving and sweaty. "Friends," Bane thundered, "what are you doing? You have a human on your back. Have you no shame? Are you common mule? Do you realize whose this is?" said Friends. "This is the Potter boy. The quicker he leaves this forest, the better." "What have you been telling him?" growled Bane. "Remember, friends, we are sworn not to set ourselves against the heavens. Have we got to read what is, to calm the movements of the planets?" Ronan pawed the ground nervously. "I'm sure friends thought he was acting for the best," he said, his gloomy voice. Bane kicked back his leg in anger. "For the best? What is that to do with us? Centaurs are concerned with what has been foretold. It is not our business to run around like donkeys and stray humans in our forest." Friend suddenly reared onto his hind legs in anger, so that Harry had to grab his shoulders and to stay on. "Do you not see that unicorn?" Friend bellowed at Bane. "Do you not understand why it is killed? Or have the planets not let you into that secret? I set myself against what is lurking in the forest, Bane. Yes, with the humans alongside me if I must." And Friends whisked around, with Harry clutching onto his best as he could. They plugged off into the trees, leaving Ronan and Bane behind them. Harry didn't have a clue what was going on. "Why is Bane so angry?" he asked. "What was that thing you saved me from anyway?" Friend slowed to a walk, warned Harry to keep his head bowed in case if a low-hanging branches, but did not answer Harry's question. They made their way through the trees in silence so far, as long that Harry thought Friends didn't want to talk to him anymore. They were passing through a particularly dense patch of trees, however, when Friends suddenly stopped. "Harry Potter, do you know what unicorn blood is used for?" "No," said Harry, startled by the odd question. "We have only used the horn and tail hair in potions." "This is because it's a monstrous thing to slay a unicorn," said Friends. "Only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. The blood of a unicorn will keep you alive even if you are inched from death, but at a terrible price. You have slain something so pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you will have but a half-life, a cursed life. From the moment the blood touches your lips." Harry stared back at Friend's head, which was dappled silver in the moonlight. "But who would be that desperate?" he wondered aloud. "If you're going to be cursed forever, that's better, isn't it?" "It is," Friends agreed, "unless all you need to stay alive long enough to drink something else, something that'll bring you back to full strength and power, something that will mean you can never die. Mr. Potter, do you know what's hidden in the school at this very moment?" "The Sorcerer's Stone." "Of course, the elixir of life, but I don't understand how. Can you think of nobody who has waited so many years to return to power, who has clung to life, awaiting their chance?" It was though an iron fist had clenched suddenly around Harry's heart. Over the rustling of the trees, he seemed to hear once more what Hagrid had told him on the night they had met. "Someone say he died. Codswallop in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die." "Do you mean?" Harry croaked. "That was wool." Harry, are you alright?" Hermione was running toward them down the path, Hagrid puffing along behind her. "I'm fine," said Harry, hardly knowing what he was saying. "The unicorn's dead, Hagrid. It's in the clearing back there." "This is where I leave you," Friends murmured as Hagrid hurried off to examine the unicorn. "You are safe now." Harry slid off his back. "Good luck, Harry Potter," said Friends. "The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs. I hope this is one of those times." He turned and cantered back into the depths of the forest, leaving Harry shivering behind him. Ron had fallen asleep in the dark common room, waiting for them to return. He shouted something about Quidditch falls when Harry roughly shook him awake. In a matter of seconds, though, he was wide-eyed as Harry began to tell him and Hermione what had happened in the forest. Harry couldn't sit down. He paced up and down in front of the fire. He was still shaking. Snape wants the stone for Voldemort, and Voldemort's waiting in the forest. And all this time, we thought Snape just wanted to get rich. Stop saying the name, said Ron in a terrified whisper, as if he thought Voldemort could hear them. Harry wasn't listening. Freyan saved me, but he shouldn't have done so. Bane was furious. He was talking about interfering with that the planets say is going to happen. They just showed that Voldemort's coming back. Bane thinks Freyan should have let Voldemort kill me. I suppose that's written in the stars as well. Will you stop saying the name? Ron hissed. So all I've got to wait for now is Snape to steal the stone. Harry went on feverishly. Then Voldemort will be able to come and finish me off. Well, I suppose Bane will be happy. Hermione looked very frightened, but she had a word of comfort. Harry, everyone says Dumbledore's the only one you know who was ever afraid of with Dumbledore around. You know who won't be able to touch you. Anyway, who says the centaurs are right? It sounds like the fortune telling to me, and Professor McGonagall says that's a very imprecise branch of magic. The sky had turned light before they stopped talking. They went to bed, exhausted, their throats sore, but the night's surprises weren't over. When Harry pulled back his sheets, he found his invisibility cloak folded neatly underneath them. There was a note pinned to it, just in case. Harry Potter, Chapter 16, Through the Trapdoor. In years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he had managed to get through his exams, and when he half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet, the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive and well behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classroom where they did their written papers. They had been given special new quills for the exams, which had been bewitched with an anti-cheating spell. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance across the desk. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make a forgetfulness potion. Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pains in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip to the forest. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep, but the truth was that Harry kept being woken by his old nightmare. Except that it was now worse than ever because there was a hooded figure dripping blood in it. Maybe it was because they hadn't seen what Harry had seen in the forest, or because they didn't have scars burning up their foreheads, but Ron and Hermione didn't seem as worried about the stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but he didn't keep visiting them in dreams, and they were so busy with their studying, they didn't have much time to fret about what Snape or anyone else might be up to. Their very last exam was History of Magic, 1 hour answering question about batty old wizards who had invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they would be free for a whole wonderful week until their exam results came out, when the ghost of Professor Ben told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchments. Harry couldn't help cheering with the rest. That was far easier than I thought it would be, said Hermione as they joined the crowds flocking out into the sunny grounds. I didn't have learned about the 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct or the uprising of Elfric the Eager. Hermione always liked to go through their exam papers afterward, but Ron said this made him feel ill, so they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid, which was basking in the warm shallows. No more studying, Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. You could look more cheerful, Harry. We have got a week before we find out how badly we have done. There's no need to worry yet. Harry was rubbing his forehead. I wish I knew what this means. He burst out angrily. My scar keeps hurting. It happened before, but never as often as this. Go to Madame Pomfrey, Hermione suggested. I'm not ill, said Harry. I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming. Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. Harry, relax. Hermione is right. The stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we have never had any proof Snape found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to try it again in a hurry, and never will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid lets Dumbledore alone. Harry nodded, but he couldn't shake off a lurking feeling that there was something he had forgotten to do, something important. When he tried to explain this, Hermione said, "That's just the exams. I woke up last night and was halfway through my transfiguration notes before I remembered we had done that one." Harry was quite sure that unsettled feeling didn't have anything to do with work, though he watched an owl flutter toward the school across the bright blue sky, a note clammed in its mouth. Hagrid was the only one who ever sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy. Never. But Harry suddenly jumped to his feet. "Where are you going?" said Ron sleepily. "I have just thought of something," said Harry. He had turned white. "We're got to go and see Hagrid now." "Why?" taunted Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "Don't you think it's a bit odd," said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who just happened to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs if it's against a wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why did I see it before?" "What are they talking about?" said Ron, but Harry, sprinting across the grounds toward the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside the house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Finishing your exams? Got time for a drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, but Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry, Hagrid. I have got to you something to ask. You know, that night you won Norbert. What did the stranger were you playing cards with look like?" "Don't know," said Hagrid. Casually, he wouldn't take off his cloak off. He saw the three of them look stunned and raise his eyebrows. "It's not that unusual, eh? Get a lot of funny folk in the Hog's Head. That's the pub town in the village. Might have been a dragon dealer. Might be. I never saw his face. He kept his hood up." Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "What did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention about Hogwarts at all?" "Might have come up," said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. "Yeah, he asked what I did, and I told him I was a gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about more sort of creatures I took after, so I told him, and I said I would always really want was a dragon, and then I can't remember too well cause he kept buying me drinks. Let's see. Yeah, and then he said he had a dragon egg, and we could play cards if you wanted, but he had to be sure I could handle it. He hadn't wanted to go to any old home, so I told him about Fluffy. A dragon would be easy." "And did he? Did he seem interested in Fluffy?" Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Well, yeah. How many three-headed dogs you have made, even around at Hogwarts?" So I told him, "Fluffy's a piece of cake, if you know how to calm it. Just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight to sleep." Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. "I shouldn't have told you that," he blurted out. "Forget what I said. Hey, where you going?" Harry, Ron and Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they came to a halt in the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. "We've got to go to Dumbledore," said Harry. Hagrid told the stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Snape or Voldemort under the cloak. It must have been easy, once he had got Hagrid drunk. "I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Friends might pack us up if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office?" They looked around, as if hoping to see a sign pointing them in the right direction. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to see him. "We'll just have to," Harry began, but a voice suddenly rang across the hall. "What are you three doing inside?" It was Professor McGonagall carrying a large pile of books. "We want to see Professor Dumbledore immediately," said Hermione, rather bravely. Harry and Ron thought. "See Professor Dumbledore?" Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing they two want to do. "Why?" Harry swallowed. "Now what? It's a sort of secret," he said, but he wished at once he hadn't because Professor McGonagall's nostrils fluttered. "Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago," she said coldly. "He received an urgent call from the Ministry of Magic and flew off to London at once." "He's gone," said Harry frantically. "Now?" "Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter. He has many demands on his time." "But this is important. This is something you have to say, much important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter." "Look," said Harry, throwing caution at his winds. "Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone." Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. "How do you know?" she spluttered. "Professor, I know for sure that someone's going to try and steal the stone. I have got to talk to Professor Dumbledore." She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. "Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow," she said finally. "I don't know how we found out about the stone, but rest assured no one can possibly steal it. It's too well protected." "But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about," she said shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. "I suggest you all go to the outside and enjoy the sunshine." But they didn't. "It's tonight," said Harry, once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. "Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight. He's found out everything he needs, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent that the note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up." "But what can we?" Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled around. Snape was standing there. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. They stared at him. "You shouldn't be inside on a day like this," he said with an odd twisted smile. "We were," Harry began, without an idea what he was going to say. "You want to be more careful," said Snape. "Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor really can't afford to lose any points, can it?" Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. "We won't, Potter. Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you are expelled. Good day to you." He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out of the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. "Right, here's what we gotta do," he whispered urgently. "One of us has got to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves it. Hermione, you'd better do that." "Why me? It's obvious," said Ron. "You can't pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know." He put on a high voice. "Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got a question 14 be wrong." "Oh, shut up," said Hermione, but she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. "And we'd better stay outside the third floor corridor," Harry told Ron. "Come on." But the part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. "I suppose you think you are harder to get past than a pack of enchantments," she stormed. "Enough with this nonsense. If I hear you come anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house." Harry and Ron went back to their common room. Harry had just said, "At least Hermione's on Snape's tail," when the portrait of the fat lady swung open and Hermione came in. "I'm sorry, Harry," she wailed. "Snape came out and asked me what I was doing, so I said, waiting for Flitwick, and Snape went to get him, and I have only just got away. I don't know where Snape went." "Well, that's it then, isn't it?" said Harry. The other two stared at him. He was pale and his eyes were glittering. "I'm going out of here tonight. I'm going to try and get into the stone first." "You're mad," said Ron. "You can't," said Hermione. "After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled." "So what?" Harry shouted. "Don't you understand? If Snape gets hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it or turn it down into school for dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore, can't you see? Do you think he will leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get to the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through the trapdoor tonight, and nothing, you'd say, is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember? He glared at them. You're right, Harry, said Hermione in a small voice. I'll use the invisibility cloak, said Harry. It's just lucky I got it back. But will it cover all three of us? Said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come on. You don't think we would let you go alone? Of course not, said Hermione briskly. How do you think you would get to the stone without us? I'd better go and take some of my books, though it might help something be useful. But if you're caught, you two will be expelled too. Not if I can help it, said Hermione grimly. Flitwick told me in a secret that I got 112% on his exam. They are not throwing me out after that. After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore. After all, this was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through all her notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk too much. Both of them were thinking about what they were to do. Slowly the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. Better get the cloak, Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to the dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell onto the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it in one of the used fluffy, and he didn't feel much like singing. He ran back down to the common room. We'd better put the cloak on here and make sure it covers all three of us. It Phil spots one of her feet wandering along on its own. What are you doing? Said a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind in an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who was looking through. He had been making another bit of freedom. Nothing, Neville, nothing, said Harry hurriedly, putting the cloak back behind him. Neville stared at their guilty faces. You're going out again, aren't you? He said. No, said Hermione. No, we are not. Why don't you go back to bed, Neville? Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing the flute to Fluffy to sleep. You can't go out, said Neville. You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in more trouble than you ever think. No, Neville, you don't understand, said Harry. This is important. But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. I won't let you do it, he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you. Neville, Ron exploded. Get away from that hole and don't be an idiot. Don't you call me an idiot, said Neville. I don't think you should be breaking any more rules, and you were the one who told me to stand up to people. Yes, but not to us, said Ron in expiration. Neville, you don't know what you're doing. He took a step forward and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. Go on then, try hit me, said Neville, raising his fist. I'm ready. Harry turned to Hermione. Do something, he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. Neville, she said, I'm really sorry about this. She raised her wand. Petrificus Totalis, she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together, so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. What have you done to him? Harry whispered. It's a full body bind, said Hermione miserably. Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville. No time to explain, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, said Ron, as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. Oh, let's kick her. Just this once, Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head as they climbed carefully around her. Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up to the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so people would trip. "Who's there?" he said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. "Know you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you ghouly or ghosty, or worse, student beastie?" He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. "Should call Filch, I should, if something's a creeping around unseen." Harry had a sudden idea. "Peeves," he said in a hoarse whisper, "the bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible." Peeves almost fell out of the air in a shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. "So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron." "Sir," he said greasily, my mistake. I didn't see you, of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peeves for his little joke, sir." "I have business here, Peeves," croaked Harry. "Stay away from this place tonight." "I will, sir. I most certainly will," said Peeves, rising up in the air again. "Hope your business goes well, Baron. I'll not bother you." And so he scooted off. "Brilliant, Harry," whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were there, outside the third-floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. "Well, there you are," Harry said quietly. "Snape's already got past Fluffy." Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon all three of them what was facing them underneath the cloak. Harry turned to the other two. "If you want to go back, I won't blame you," he said. "You can take the cloak. I won't need it now." "Don't be stupid," said Ron. "We are coming," said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked low, rumbling growls met their ears. All three of the dog noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. "What's that at its feet?" Hermione whispered. "Looks like a harp," said Ron. "Snape must have left it there. It must wake up the moment you stop playing," said Harry. "Well, here goes." He put Hagrid's flute onto his lips and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly the dog's growl ceased. It tottered on its paws and fell to its knees. Then it slumped to the ground fast asleep. "Keep playing," Ron warned Harry as they slipped out the cloak and crept forward to the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peering over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's leg. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor. It swung up and open. "What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing, just black." "There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop." Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. "You want to go first?" "Are you sure?" said Ron. "I don't know how this thing works. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep." Harry handed the flute over. In a few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched, but at the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into the deep sleep. Harry climbed it over and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of a bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging by his own fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right?" "Right," said Ron. "See you in a minute, I hope." And Hermione, "Please, look after Ron." And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as well as down, down and down. Flump! With a funny, muffled sort of a thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of a plant. "It's okay," he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. "It's a soft landing. You can jump." Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. "What's the stuff?" were his first words. "Dunno, some sort of a plant thing. I suppose it's here to break the fall." "Come on, Hermione." The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. "We'd just be miles under the school," she said. "Lucky this plant thing's here, really," said Ron. "Lucky?" shrieked Hermione. "Look at you both." She leapt up and struggled toward to the damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the other two boys fought to pull the plant them off. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. "Stop moving," Hermione ordered them. "I know what this is. It's the Devil Snare." "Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help," snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. "Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it," said Hermione. "Well, hurry up, I can't breathe," Harry gasped, wrestling with it as though it curled around his chest. Devil Snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the tap." "So, light a fire," Harry choked. "Yes, of course, but there's no wood," Hermione cried, wringing her hands. "Have you gone mad?" Ron bellowed. "Are you a witch or not?" "All right," said Hermione, and she whipped out her wand, waved at it, muttering something, and the jet of same bluebell flames she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself in their bodies, and they were able to pull free. "Lucky you pay attention, Hermione," said Harry, as though joined their hands by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. "Yeah," said Ron, "and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There is no wood, honestly." "This way," said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway which was the trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered the dragons said to be guarding walls in Wizard Bank. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, no wood had been enough. "Can you hear something?" Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. "Do you think it's a ghost?" "I don't know. Sounds like wings to me." "There's a light ahead. I can see something moving." They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arcing high above them. It was full of small, jeweled, bright birds fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. "Do you think they will attack us if we cross the room?" said Ron. "Probably," said Harry. "They don't look very vicious, but I suppose they all swoop down at once. Well, there's another choice. I'll run." He took a deep breath, covered his face with arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel a sharp beak and claws tearing at him in any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They rocked and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge. It tottered on its paws and fell to its knees. Then it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. "Keep playing," Ron warned Harry as they slipped out the cloak and crept forward to the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peering over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "All right." Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's leg. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor. It swung up and open. "What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing, just black." "There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop." Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. "You want to go first?" "Are you sure?" said Ron. "I don't know how this thing works. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep." Harry handed the flute over. In a few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched, but at the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into the deep sleep. Harry climbed it over and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of a bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging by his own fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the owlry and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right?" "Right," said Ron. "See you in a minute, I hope. And Hermione, please look after Ron." And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as well as down, down, and down. Flump! With a funny, muffled sort of a thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of a plant. "It's okay," he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. "It's a soft landing. You can jump." Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. "What's this stuff?" were his first words. "Dunno, some sort of a plant thing. I suppose it's here to break the fall." "Come on, Hermione." The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. "We'd just be miles under the school," she said. "Lucky this plant thing's here, really," said Ron. "Lucky?" shrieked Hermione. "Look at you both." She leapt up and struggled toward to the damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the other two boys fought to pull the plant them off. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. "Stop moving," Hermione ordered them. "I know what this is. It's the Devil Snare." "Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help," snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. "Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it," said Hermione. "Well, hurry up, I can't breathe," Harry gasped, wrestling with it as though it curled around his chest. Devil Snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the tap." "So, light a fire," Harry choked. "Yes, of course, but there's no wood," Hermione cried, wringing her hands. "Have you gone mad?" Ron bellowed. "Are you a witch or not?" "All right," said Hermione, and she whipped out a wand, waved at it, muttering something, and the jet of same bluebell flames she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself in their bodies, and they were able to pull free. "Lucky you pay attention, Hermione," said Harry, as though joined their hands by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. "Yeah," said Ron, "and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There is no wood, honestly." "This way," said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered the dragons said to be guarding walls in Wizard Bank. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, no wood had been enough. "Can you hear something?" Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. "Do you think it's a ghost?" "I don't know. Sounds like wings to me." "There's a light ahead. I can see something moving." They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arcing high above them. It was full of small, jeweled, bright birds fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. "Do you think they will attack us if we cross the room?" said Ron. "Probably," said Harry. "They don't look very vicious, but I suppose they all swoop down at once. Well, there's another choice. I'll run." He took a deep breath, covered his face with arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel a sharp beak and claws tearing at him in any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They rugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried a Alohomora charm. "Now what?" said Ron. "These birds, they can't be here just for decoration," said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering and glittering. "They are not birds," Harry said suddenly. "They are keys, winged keys. Look carefully." "So that means—" He looked around the chamber while the other two squinted up the flock of keys. "Yes, look, broomsticks. We have got to catch the key to the door." "But there are hundreds of them." Ron examined the lock on the door. "We are looking for a big old-fashioned one. probably silver like the handle. They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring onto the mist of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and divided so quickly it almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, there was Harry, the youngest seeker in the sanctuary. He had a knack of spotting things that other people didn't. After a minute's weaving through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that hadn't bent one wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed roughly through the keyhole. "That one," he called to the others. "That big one. There. No, there with the bright blue wing. The feathers are all crumpled to one side." Ron went speeding to the direction that Harry was pointing, crashed in the ceiling, and he really fell off the broom. "We have got to close in on it," Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. "Ron, you come at it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try to catch it right now." Ron dived, Hermione rocketed upward, the key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. It sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward and with a nasty crunching noise pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They laughed and landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, and the key struggling in his hand, he rammed it onto the lock and turned. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again, looking for a battered now that it had been caught twice. "Ready?" Harry asked the other two, and his hand to the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark, they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped onto it, light suddenly flooded the room to reveal the astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard behind the black chessmen. They were all taller than they were and carved from what looked like a black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. "Now what do we do?" Harry whispered. "It's obvious, isn't it?" said Ron. "We got to play our way across the room. Behind the white pieces they would see another door." "How?" said Hermione nervously. "I think," said Ron, "we are going to have to be the chessmen." He walked up to the Black Knight and put his hand around, touched the knight's hose. At once, the stone sprang to life, the horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmeted head to look down on the Ron. "Do we, have to join you to get across?" The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. "This needs thinking about," he said. "I suppose we got to take the place of 3 of the other black pieces." Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching the Ron thing. Finally he said, "Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are good at chess." "We've got not to be offended," said Harry quickly. "Just tell us what to do." "Well, Harry, you take the place of the bishop, and Hermione next to him instead of the castle." "What about you?" "I'm going to be a knight," said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at these words a knight, a bishop, and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, and Hermione took. "White plays first always in chess," said Ron, peering across the board. "Yes, look." A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry moved diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shock came when their sight. Their other knight was taken. The white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still face down. "Had to let that happen," said Ron, looking shaken. "Leaves you free to take the bishop. Hermione, go on." Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a huddle of limp black layers slumped along the wall. Twice Ron had only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. "We are nearly there," he muttered suddenly. Let me think. The white queen turned her blank face toward him. "Yes," said Ron softly. "It's the only way. I've got to be taken." "Now!" Harry and Hermione shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to make some sacrifices. I take one step forward, she'll take me. That leaves you free to checkmate the king, Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, look, if you didn't hurry up, he'll all be at the stone. There's no other alternative. Ready? Ron called, his face pale but determined. Here I go. Now, don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head with her stone arm, and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed but stayed on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to one side. He looked as if he had been knocked out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 paces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one last desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. What if He'll be alright, said Harry, trying to convince himself. What do you reckon next? We had sprouts. That was the Devil Snare. Flitwick must have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's. They had reached another door. Alright, Harry whispered. Go on. Harry pushed it open. A disgusting smell filled their nostrils, making both of them pull their robes up over their noses. Eyes watering, they saw flat on the floor in front of them a troll even larger than one they had tackled, out cold with a bloody lump on its head. I'm glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry whispered as they stepped carefully over one of its massive legs. Come on, I can't breathe. He pulled open the next door, both of them hardly daring to look at what came next, but there was nothing very frightening in here. Just a table with 7 differently shaped bottles standing on it on a line. Snape's, said Harry. What do we have to do? They stepped over the threshold, and immediately a fire sprang up behind them in the doorway. It wasn't an ordinary fire either. It was purple. At the same time, they looked like black flames shot up at the doorway leading onward. They were trapped. Look, Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles. Harry looked over her shoulder and read it. Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. One among us, 7, will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting bidden in line. Choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we'll give you these clues for. First, however sly the poison tries to hide, you will always find some on nettle wine's left side. Second, different are those who stand at either end, but if you would move onward, neither is your friend. Third, as you clearly all are different size, neither dwarf or giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right are twins once you taste them, though different at their first sight. Hermione let out a great sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw that she was smiling, the very last thing he felt like doing. Brilliant, said Hermione. This isn't magic, it's logic, a puzzle. A lot of the great wizards haven't got an ounce of logic, but they would be stuck in here forever. But so will we, won't we? Of course not, said Hermione. Everything we need is here on this paper. 7 bottles, 3 are poison, 2 are wine, 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us back through the purple. But how do we know which to drink? Give me a minute. Hermione read the paper several times, then she walked up and down the line of bottles, muttering to herself and pointing at them. At last, she clapped her hands. Got it, she said. The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire toward the stone. Harry looked at the tiny bottle. There's only enough there for 1 of us, he said. That's hardly 1 swallow. They looked at each other. Which one will get you back to the purple flame? Hermione pointed at the rounded bottle at the right end of the line. You drink that, said Harry. No, listen. Get back to Ron. Grab brooms from the flying tree room. They will get you out of the trapdoor and past Fluffy, go straight to the owlry and said Hedwig to Dumbledore, "We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him really." "But Harry, what if you know who with him?" "Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I?" said Harry, pointing his car. "I might get lucky again." Hermione's lip trembled, and suddenly she dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. "Hermione, Harry, you're a great wizard, you know." "I'm not as good as you," said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. "Me," said Hermione, "books and cleverness. There are more important things, friendship and bravery. And oh, Harry, be careful." "You drink first," said Harry. "You are sure which is which, aren't you?" "Positive," said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle, and at the end she shuddered. "It's not poison," said Harry anxiously. "No, but it's like ice. Quick, go before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Now go!" Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames. "Here I come," he said, and he drained the little bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as though ice flooding his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself, saw the black flames licking his body, but couldn't feel them. For a moment, he could see nothing but dark fire. Then he was on the other side, in the last chamber. There was already someone there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. Harry Potter, Chapter 17, The Man with Two Faces. It was Quirrell. "You?" gasped Harry. Quirrell smiled. His face wasn't twitching at all. "Me," he said calmly. "I wondered whether I would be meeting you here, Potter. But I thought Snape—" "Severus," Quirrell laughed. And it wasn't his usual curring trouble either, but cold and sharp. "Yes, Severus does seem the type, doesn't he? So useful to have him swooping around like an overgrown bat. Next to him, who would suspect?" Poor stuttering Professor Quirrell. Harry couldn't take it in. This couldn't be true. It couldn't. "But Snape tried to kill me." No, dear boy. I tried to kill you. Your friend Miss Granger accidentally knocked me over as she rushed to set fire to Snape at the Quidditch match. She broke my eye contact with you. Another few seconds I would have called off you that room. I would have managed it before then. Snape hadn't been muttering with his counter curse trying to save you. Snape was trying to save me. "Of course," said Quirrell coolly. "Why would you think he wanted to referee your next match? He was trying to make sure I didn't do it again. Funny really, he didn't have bothered. I couldn't do anything with Dumbledore watching. All the other teachers thought Snape was trying to stop Gryffindor from winning. He did make himself unpopular, and what a waste of time, when after all that, I'm going to kill you tonight." Quirrell snapped his fingers. Ropes sprang from the thin hair and wrapped themselves tightly around Harry. "You're too nosy to live, Potter. Scurrying around the school on Halloween like that. For all I know, you'd seem coming to look at what was guarding the stone. You let the troll in." "Certainly, I have special gift with trolls. You must have seen what I did to the one in the chamber back there. Unfortunately, while everyone else was running around looking for it, Snape, who already suspected me, went straight to the third floor to head me off, and not only he did my troll fail to beat you to the death, that three-headed dog didn't even manage to bite Snape's leg off properly. Now wait quietly, Potter. I need time to examine the interesting mirror." It was only then that Harry realized what it was standing behind Quirrell. It was the mirror of Erised. "This mirror is the key to finding the stone," Quirrell murmured, tapping his way around the frame. "Trust Dumbledore to come up with something like this, but he's in London. I'll be far away by the time he gets back." All Harry could think of doing was to keep Quirrell talking and stop from concentrating on the mirror. "I saw you and Snape in the forest," he blurted out. "Yes," said Quirrell idly, walking around the mirror to look at back. "He was on to me by that time, trying to find out how far I'd got. He suspected me all along, tried to frighten me as though he could when I had Lord Voldemort at my side. Quirrell came back out from behind the mirror and stared hungrily into it. I see the stone. I'm presenting it to my master. But where is it? Harry struggled against the ropes behind him, but they didn't give. He had to keep Quirrell from giving his whole attention to the mirror. But Snape always seemed to hate me so much. Oh, he does, said Quirrell casually. Heavens, yes. He was at Hogwarts with your father. Didn't you know? They loathed each other, but he never wanted you dead. But I heard you a few days ago sobbing. I thought Snape was threatening you. For the first time, a spasm of fear flitted across Quirrell's face. Sometimes, he said, I find it hard to follow my master's instructions. He is a great wizard, and I am weak. You mean he was there in the classroom with you? Harry gasped. He is with me wherever I go, said Quirrell quietly. I met him when I traveled around the world. A foolish young man I was then, full of ridiculous ideas about good and evil. Lord Voldemort showed me how wrong I was. There is no good and evil. There is only power, and those too weak to seek it. Since then, I have served him faithfully, although I have let him down many times. He has had to be very hard on me. Quirrell shivered suddenly. He does not forgive mistakes easily. When I failed to steal the stone from Gringotts, he was most displeased. He punished me, decided he would have to keep a closer watch on me. Quirrell's voice trailed away. Harry was remembering his trip to Diagon Alley. How could he have been so stupid? He had seen Quirrell there that very day, shaken hands with him in the leaky cauldron. Quirrell cursed under his breath. I don't understand. Is the stone inside the mirror? Should I break it? Harry's mind was racing. What I want more than anything else in the world at that moment, he thought, is to find the stone before Quirrell does. So if I look in the mirror, I should see myself finding it, which means I'll see where it's hidden. But how can I look without Quirrell realizing what I'm up to? Harry tried to edge to the left to get the front of the glass without Quirrell noticing, but the ropes around his ankles were too tight. He tripped and fell over. Quirrell ignored him. He was still talking to himself. What does this mirror do? How does it work? Help me, master. And to Harry's horror, a voice answered, and the voice seemed to come from Quirrell himself. Use the boy. Use the boy. Quirrell rounded on Harry. Yes, Potter, come here. He clapped his hand at once, and the ropes binding Harry fell off. Harry got slowly to his feet. Come here, Potter, Quirrell repeated. Look in the mirror and tell me what you say. Harry walked toward him. I must lie, he thought desperately. I must look and lie about what I see, that's all. Quirrell moved close behind him. Harry breathed a fine smell that seemed to come from Quirrell's turban. He closed his eyes, stepped in front of the mirror, and opened them again. He saw his reflection, pale and scared looking at first, and a moment later, the reflection smiled at him. It put its hand into its pocket and pulled out a blood-red stone. It winked and put the stone back in its pocket, and as it did, so Harry felt something heavy drop in his real pocket. Somehow, incredibly, he had gotten the stone. Well, said Quirrell impatiently, what do you say? Harry screwed up his courage. I see myself shaking hands with Dumbledore. He invented. I have won the House Cup for Gryffindor. Quirrell cursed again. Get out of the way, he said. As Harry moved aside, he felt the Sorcerer's Stone against his leg. Dare he make a break for it? But he hadn't walked 5 paces before the high voice spoke, though Quirrell wasn't moving his lip. He lies. He lies. Potter, come back here, Quirrell shouted. Tell me the truth. What do you just say? The high voice spoke again. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you're not strong enough. I have strength enough for this. Harry felt as if Devil Snare was rooting him up to the spot. He couldn't move a muscle. Petrified, he watched as Quirrell reached up and began to unwrap his turban. What was going on? The turban fell away. Quirrell's head looked strangely small without it. Then he turned slowly onto the spot. Harry would have screamed, but he couldn't make a sound. Where there should have been a back to Quirrell's head, and there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. It was a chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils like a snake. "Harry Potter," it whispered. Harry tried to take a step backward, but his legs wouldn't move. "Say what I have become," the face said. "Mere shadow and a vapor, and I have far more than I can share as another body. But there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me these past weeks. You saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me, for my own good. Now, once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket?" So he knew. The feeling suddenly surged back into Harry's leg. He stumbled backward. "Don't be a fool, Harry Potter," snarled the face. "Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet your same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy." "Liar!" Harry shouted suddenly. Quirrell was walking backward at him, and so that Voldemort could still see him. The evil face was now smiling. "Ha ha! How touching!" it hissed. "I always value bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight. But your mother needn't have died. She was trying to protect you. Now, give me the stone, unless you want her to have died in vain." "Never!" Harry sprang toward the flame door, but Voldemort screamed, "Seize him!" And the next second, Harry felt Quirrell's hand close to his wrist. At once, a needle-sharp pain seared across Harry's skull. His head felt as though it was about to split into two. He yelled, struggling with all his might, and to his surprise, Quirrell let go of him. The pain in his head lessened. He looked around wildly to see where Quirrell had gone, and saw him hunched in pain, looking at his fingers. They were blistered before his eyes. "Seize him! Seize him!" shrieked Voldemort again, and Quirrell lunged, knocking Harry clean off his feet, landing on top of him, both hands around Harry's neck. Harry's scar was almost blinding him with pain, yet he could see Quirrell howling in agony. "Master, I cannot hold him! My hands! My hands!" And Quirrell, though pinning Harry to the ground with his knees, let go of his neck and stared, bewildered at his own palm. Harry could see they looked burned raw red and shiny. "Then kill him, fool, and be done with it!" screeched Voldemort. Quirrell raised his hand to perform a deadly curse, but Harry, by instinct, reached up and grabbed Quirrell's face. "Ah!" Quirrell rolled off him, his face blistering too, and then Harry knew Quirrell couldn't touch his bare skin, not without suffering terrible pain. His only chance was to keep hold of Quirrell, keep him enough in pain to stop him from doing a curse. Harry jumped to his feet, caught Quirrell by the arm, and hung on to as tight as he could. Quirrell screamed and tried to throw Harry off. The pain in Harry's head was building, but he couldn't say. He could hear Quirrell terrible shrieks and Voldemort's yells of, "Kill him! Kill him!" and other voices maybe in Harry's own head crying, "Harry! Harry!" He felt Quirrell's arm wrenched from his grasp, knew all was lost, and fell into blackness, down, down, and down. Something gold was glistening just above him. The snitch. He tried to catch it, but his arms were too heavy. He blinked. It wasn't the snitch at all. It was a pair of glasses. How strange. He blinked it again. The smiling face of Albus Dumbledore swam into view above him. "Good afternoon, Harry," said Dumbledore. Harry stared at him. Then he remembered. "Sir, the stone! It was Quirrell. He's got the stone, sir. Quick!" "Calm yourself, dear boy. You're a little behind the times," said Dumbledore. "Quirrell does not have the stone." "Then who does, sir? Harry, please relax, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out." Harry swallowed and looked around him. He realized he must be in the hospital wing. He was lying in a bed with white linen sheets, and next to him was a table piled high with what looked like half the candy shop. "Tokens from your friends and their admirers," said Dumbledore, beaming. "What happened down in the dungeons between you and Professor Quirrell is a complete secret. So naturally, the whole school knows. I believe your friends, Misters Fred and George Weasley, were responsible for trying to send you a toilet seat. No doubt they thought it would amuse you. Madame Pomfrey, however, felt it might not be very hygienic and confiscated it." "How long have I been here, sir?" "How long? 3 days it is. Mr. Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger will be most relieved you have come round. They have been extremely worried." "But sir, the stone. I see you are not to be distracted. Very well. The stone. Professor Quirrell did not manage to take it from you. I arrived in time to prevent that, although you're doing very well on your own, I must say. You got there. You got Hermione's owl. We must have crossed in midair. No sooner had I reached London than I had craved. It became clear to me that the place I should be was the one I just left. I arrived in just time to pull Quirrell off you." "It was you. I feared I might be too late." "You nearly were. I couldn't have kept him off the stone much longer. Not the stone, boy. You. The effort you involved nearly killed you. For one terrible moment there, I was afraid it had. As for the stone, it has been destroyed." "Destroyed?" said Harry blankly. "But your friend, Nicholas Flamel—" "Oh, you know about Nicholas," said Dumbledore, sounding quite delighted. "You did do the thing properly, didn't you? Well, Nicholas and I have a little had chat, and agreed it's all for the best. But that means he and his wife will die, won't they? They have enough elixir stored to set their affairs in order, and then—" "Yes, they will die." Dumbledore smiled and looked at the amazement of Harry's face. "To one as young as you, I'm sure it seems incredible. But to Nicholas and Pembrel, it really is like going to bed after a very, very long day. After all, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. You know, the stone was really not such a wonderful thing. As much money and life as you could want, the two things most human belongs and want the most. Is the trouble is, humans do have a knack of choosing precisely those things that are worst for them." Harry lay there, lost for words. Dumbledore hummed a little and smiled at the ceiling. "Sir," said Harry, "I have been thinking, sir, even if the stone's gone, you know how. Call him Voldemort, Harry. Always use the proper name for things. Fear of a name increases the fear of the thing itself." "Yes, sir. Well, Voldemort's going to try other ways of coming back, isn't he? He hasn't gone, has he?" "No, Harry, he has not. He's still out there somewhere, perhaps looking for another body to share. Not being truly alive, he cannot be killed. He left Quirrell to die. He shows just as little mercy to his followers as his enemies. Nevertheless, Harry, while you may only have delayed his return to power, it will merely take someone else who is prepared to fight what seems losing battle next time. And if he delayed again and again, why, he may never return to power." Harry nodded but stopped quickly because it made his head hurt. Then he said, "Sir, there are some other things I would like to know, if you can tell me. Things I want to know the truth about." "The truth," Dumbledore sighed. "It's a beautiful and a terrible thing, Harry, and should therefore be treated with great caution. However, I shall answer your questions unless I have very good reason not to, in which case I beg you'll forgive me. I shall not, of course, lie. Well, Voldemort said that he would only kill my mother because she tried to stop him from killing me. But why would he want to kill me in the first place? Dumbledore sighed very deeply this time. Ask. The first thing you asked me, I cannot tell. Not today. Not now. You will know one day. Put it from your mind for now, Harry. When you are older. I know you hate to hear this. When you are ready, you will know. And Harry knew it. It would be no good to argue with Albus Dumbledore. But why? Couldn't Quirrell touch me? Your mother died to save you, Harry. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it's love. He didn't realize that love as powerful as your mother's for you leaves its own mark, not a scar, not a visible sign. It have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. It is in our very skin, Harry. Quirrell, full of hatred, greed and ambition, sharing his soul with Voldemort, could not touch you for this reason. It was agony to touch a person marked by something so pure and good. Dumbledore now became very interested in a bird out on the windowsill, which gave Harry time to dry his eyes on the sheet. When he had found his voice again, Harry said, "And the invisibility cloak? Do you know who sent it to me, Professor?" "Ah, your father happened to leave it in my possession, and I thought you might like it." Dumbledore's eye twinkled. "Useful things, Sir Harry. Your father used it mainly for sneaking off to the kitchens to steal food when he was here. And there is something else. Fire away, boy." "Quirrell," said Snape. "Professor Snape, Harry." "Yes, him. Quirrell, he said he hates me because he hated my father. Is that true?" "Well, they did rather detest each other, not unlike yourself and Mr. Malfoy. And then your father did something Snape could never forgive." "What?" "He saved his life." "What?" "Yes," said Dumbledore dreamily. "Funny, the way people's minds work, isn't it? Professor Snape couldn't bear a thing being in your father's debt. I do believe he worked so hard to protect you this year, because he felt that would make him and your father even. Then he could go back to hating your father's memory in peace." Harry tried to understand this, but it made his head pound, so he stopped. "And sir, there's one more thing." "Just the one?" "How did I get the stone out the mirror?" "Ah, no, I'm glad you asked me that. It was one of my more brilliant ideas, and between you and me, that says something. You see, only one who wanted to find the stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. Otherwise, they would just see themselves making gold and drinking elixir of life. My brain surprises me, even me sometimes. Now, enough questions. I suggest you make a start on the sweets." "Ah, Betty bought every flavor beans. I was unfortunate enough in my youth to come across a vomit-flavored ones, and since then I'm afraid I would rather lost my liking for them. But then again, I think I'll be safe with a nice coffee, don't you?" He smiled and popped the golden brown bean into his mouth. Then he choked and said, "Lars, earwax." Madame Pomfrey, the nurse, was a nice woman, but very strict. "Just 5 minutes," Harry pleaded. "Absolutely not. You let Professor Dumbledore in." "Well, of course, that was the headmaster, quite different. You need rest." "I'm resting, look, lying down and everything." "Oh, go on, Madame Pomfrey." "Oh, very well," she said, "but 5 minutes only." And she let Ron and Hermione in. "Harry!" Hermione looked ready to fling her arms around him again, but Harry was glad she held herself in, as his head was very still so. "Oh, Harry, we were so sure you were going to. Dumbledore was so worried." "The whole school's talking about it," said Ron. "What will really happen?" It was one of the rare occasions when the true story is even more strange than exciting than the wild rumors. Harry told them everything. Quirrell, the mirror, the stone, and Voldemort. Ron and Hermione were a very good audience. They gasped in all the right places, and when Harry told them what was under Quirrell's turban, Hermione screamed out loud. "So the stone's gone, eh?" said Ron finally. "Flamel's just going to die." "That's what I said, but Dumbledore thinks that—" "What was it?" "To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. I always said he was off his rocker," said Ron. looking quite impressed at how crazy his hero was. "So what happened to you two?" said Harry. "Well, I got back all right," said Hermione. "I brought Ron around. That took a while, and we were dashing up to the Owlry to contact Dumbledore when we met him in the entrance hall. He already knew. He just said, 'Harry's gone after him, hasn't he?' and hurled off to the third floor." "Do you think what he meant you to do it?" said Ron, "sending you your father's cloak and everything?" "Well," Hermione exploded, "if he did, I mean to say that's terrible. He could have been killed." No, it isn't," said Harry thoughtfully. "He's a funny man, Dumbledore. I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he know more or less everything that goes on here, you know. I reckon he had got a pretty good idea we were going to try, and instead of stopping us, he just taught us enough to help. I don't think it was an accident. He let me to find out the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort if I could." "Yeah, Dumbledore's off his rocker all right," said Ron proudly. "Listen, you're got to be up for the end-year feast tomorrow. The points are all in Slytherin 1, of course. You missed the last Quidditch match. We were steamrolled by Ravenclaw without you, but the food will be good." At that moment, Madame Pomfrey burst over. "You had nearly 15 minutes. Now out," she said firmly. After a good night's sleep, Harry felt nearly back to normal. "I want to go and eat the feast," he told Madame Pomfrey as she straightened his many candy boxes. "I can't I? Professor Dumbledore says you are allowed to go," she said stiffly, as though, in her opinion, Professor Dumbledore didn't realize how risky feast could be. "And you have got another visit." "Oh good," said Harry. "Who is it?" Hagrid sighed through the door as he spoke. As usual when he was indoors, Hagrid looked too big to be allowed. He sat down next to Harry, looked one at him, and burst into tears. "It's all my ruddy fault," he sobbed, his face in his hands, "and I told that evil git how to get past Fluffy. I told him. It was the only thing he didn't know, and I told him. He could have died. All for Dragon Egg. I'll never drink again. I should be chucked out and made to live as a muggle." "Hagrid," said Harry, shocked to see Hagrid shaking with grief and remorse, great tears leaking down from his beard. "Hagrid have found out that somehow this is Voldemort we are talking about. He had found out even if you hadn't told him." "Yeah, could have died," sobbed Hagrid. "And don't say the name. Voldemort," Harry bellowed, and Hagrid was so shocked he stopped crying. "I have met him, and I'm calling him by his name. Please cheer up, Hagrid. You saved the stone. It's gone. You can't use it. Have a chocolate frog." "I've got loads." Hagrid wiped his nose on the back of his hand and said, "That reminds me, I got your present." "It's not a stout sandwich, isn't it?" said Harry anxiously, and at last Hagrid gave a weak chuckle. "Nah, Dumbledore gave me the day off yesterday to fix it. Of course, he should have sacked me instead. Anyway, got you this." It seemed to be a handsome, leather-covered book. Harry opened it curiously. It was full of wizard photographs. Smiling and waving at him from every page were his mother and father. Sent owls after all your parents. Old school friends asking for photos. Knew you didn't have any. Do you like it? Harry couldn't speak, but Hagrid understood. Harry made his way down to the end of the feast here, alone, and that night he had been held up by Madame Pomfrey, fussing about, insisting on giving him one last checkup, so the great hall was already full. It was decked out in the Slytherin colors of green and silver to celebrate Slytherin's winning the House Cup for the 7th year in a row. A huge banner showing the Slytherin serpent covered the wall behind the high table. When Harry walked in there with a sudden hush, and everybody started talking loudly at once, he slipped into a seat between Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table and tried to ignore the fact that people were standing up to look at him. Fortunately, Dumbledore arrived moments later. The babble died away. "Another year gone," Dumbledore said cheerfully, "and I must trouble you with an old man's wheezing waffle before we sink our teeth into a delicious feast. What a year it has been. Hopefully your heads are all a little fuller than they were." You have the whole summer ahead to get them nice and empty before the next year starts. Now, as I understand, the House Cup here needs awarding, and the point stands thus. In 4th place, Gryffindor with 312 points. In 3rd, Hufflepuff with 352 points. Ravenclaw has 426 points, and Slytherin with 472 points. A storm of cheering, the stamping broke out from the Slytherin table. Harry could see Draco Malfoy banging his goblet on the table. It was a sickening sight. Yes, well done, Slytherin, well done, said Dumbledore. However, recent events must be taken into account. The room went still, very still. The Slytherin smile faded away. Ahem, said Dumbledore. I have still a few more last-minute points to dish out. Let me say. Yes. First, to Mr. Ronald Weasley. Ron went purple in the face. He looked like a radish with bad sunburn. For the best played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Gryffindor cheers nearly raised the bewitched ceiling. The stars overhead seemed to quiver. Percy could be heard telling the other prefects, "My brother, you know, my youngest brother, got past Professor McGonagall's giant chess set." At last there was a silence again. Second, to Miss Hermione Granger, for the use of cool intellectual logic. Yet, in the face of fire, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Hermione buried her face in arms. Harry strongly suspected she burst into tears. Gryffindors up and down the table were beside themselves. There were the 100 points up. Third, to Mr. Harry Potter, said Dumbledore. The room went deadly quiet. For pure nerve and outstanding courage, I award Gryffindor House 60 points. The din was defeating. Those who could add up while yelling themselves hoarse knew that Gryffindor now had 472 points, exactly as the same as Slytherin. They had tied up for the House Cup if only Dumbledore had given Harry just one more point. Dumbledore raised his hand. The room gradually fell into silence. There, all kinds of courage, said Dumbledore smiling. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but just as much to stand up to your friends. I therefore award 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom. Someone standing outside the Great Hall might well have thought some sort of explosion had taken place. So loud was the noise that erupted from the Gryffindor table. Harry, Ron and Hermione stood up to yell and cheer for Neville White. The shock disappeared under the pile of people hugging him. He had never won so much as a point for Gryffindor before. Harry stood cheering, nudged Ron in the ribs, and pointed at Malfoy, who couldn't have looked more stunned and horrified if he had just the body-bind curse put on him, which means that Dumbledore called over the storm of applause, for even Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were celebrating the downfall of Slytherin. We need a little change of decoration. He clapped his hands. In an instant, the green hangings became scarlet and the silver became gold. The huge Slytherin serpent vanished and the towering Gryffindor lion took its place. Snape was shaking Professor McGonagall's hand with a horrible forced smile. He caught Harry's eye and Harry knew at once that Snape's feelings toward him hadn't changed one jot. This didn't worry Harry. It seemed as though life would be back to normal next year, or as normal as it ever was at Hogwarts. It was the best evening of Harry's life, better than winning at Quidditch or Christmas or knocking out mountain trolls. He would never, ever forget this night. Harry had almost forgotten that the exam results were still to come, but come, and they did. To their great surprise, both he and Ron passed with good marks. Hermione, of course, had the best grades of the first year. Even Neville scrapped it through, his good at homology mark making him up for his abysmal potions won. They had hoped that Goyle, who had almost as stupid as he was mean, might be thrown out, but he had passed too. It was a shame, but as Ron said, you couldn't have everything in life. And suddenly, their wardrobes were empty, their trunks were packed. Neville's toad were found lurking in the corner of the toilets. Notes were handed out to all students warning them not to use magic over the holidays. "I always hope they'll forget to give us these," said Fred Weasley sadly. Hagrid was there to take them down to the fleet of boats and sailed across the lake. They were boarding the Hogwarts Express, talking and laughing as the countryside became greener and tilelier, eating Betty Pots every flavor beans as steadfast Muggle towns, pulling off all their wizard robes and putting on jackets and coats, pulling into platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station. It took quite a while for them all to get off the platform. The wizened old guard was up by the ticket barrier, letting them go through the gate in 2s and 3s so they didn't attract attention by all bursting out of a solid wall at once and alarming the Muggles. "You must come and stay this summer," said Ron. "Both of you. I'll send you an owl." "Thanks," said Harry. "I'll need something to look forward to." People jostled them as they moved forward toward the gateway back to the Muggle world. Some of them called, "Bye, Harry." "See you, Potter. Still famous," said Ron, grinning at him. "Not where I'm going, I promise you," said Harry. He, Ron and Hermione passed through the gateway together. "There is Mom. There he is. Look." It was Ginny Weasley, Ron's younger sister, but she wasn't pointing at Ron. "Harry Potter," she squealed. "Look, Mom, I can see." "Be quiet, Ginny. It's rude to point." Mrs. Weasley smiled down at them. "Busy here?" she said. "Very," said Harry. "Thanks for the fudge and the sweater, Mrs. Weasley." "Oh, it was nothing, dear." "Ready, are you?" It was Uncle Vernon, still purple-faced, still mustached, still looking furious at the nerve of Harry, carrying an owl in a cage in a station full of ordinary people. Behind him stood Aunt Petunia and Dudley, looking terrified at the very sight of Harry. "You must be Harry's family," said Mrs. Weasley. "In a manner of speaking," said Uncle Vernon. "Hurry up, boy. We haven't got all day." He walked away. Harry hung back for the last word with Ron and Hermione. "See you over the summer, then." "Hope you have, a good holiday," said Hermione, looking uncertainly after Uncle Vernon, shocked that everyone could be so unpleasant. "Oh, I will," said Harry, and they were surprised at the grin that was spreading over his face. "They don't know we are not allowed to use magic outside the school. I'm going to have a lot of fun with Dudley this summer." Alrighty then, folks, we are done with the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone audiobook, finished at last, and I humbly thank you all for your undivided support and backing me up with the subscribers and likes. Thank you all once again, thank you very much, and have a blessed day ahead.